Different prisons have different levels of seriousness, different degrees to which violence can be expected. Nowhere that I spent time was more serious than a high desert in California. There were rules at high desert. Mandatory yard, mandatory program, mandatory chow, mandatory workout. It's a lot of mandatories. What it means is that if you can step outside of your cell, if there's an occasion upon which you are allowed to interact with other inmates, you must do so. You can't sleep in and skip breakfast, or decide it's too hot outside and not go out to yard. You must go out if you can. The reason for this is that if there's a riot and your race-based gang is fighting with somebody else, you have to be there. You have to participate. And so, every time you can step outside of your cell, you do, or there will be consequences. There are various degrees to which your gang might inflict violence upon you if you don't follow the rules. At the high end, there's a removal. A removal is where they stab you, or they put you down and kick you and try and kick you until the cops make them stop. Basically, they'll kill you if they can. That's the highest level of violence that you can expect. Below that is a hard check. A hard check is where 2 or 3 guys run up on you and hold you so you can't move, and they punch you in the face good and hard 15, 20 times. Or maybe you get stabbed. Just a little stabbed by your friends. That's a hard check. It's reserved for whenever people are really screwing up. The lowest level of violence you can expect is a soft check. A soft check is the prison equivalent of a polite warning. That's where you don't see it coming and you get punched in the face 5 or 6 times to make a point. Soft checks and hard checks are not meant to be the end of your participation in the gang. You're supposed to take it in good humor and come out to yard the next day and pretend like nothing had happened. Maybe even apologize for having screwed up. There's one more mandatory. This one doesn't get talked about quite as much. You must put in work for your gang. You have to earn your bones, is the slang. What this means is that every inmate must commit violence for their gang at some point. An assault, a stabbing, something. Maybe just a soft check. Of course, the nature of the situation is that there are far fewer people who need to be hurt than there are people who have to hurt them. By which I mean you have 20 or 30 guys waiting to put in work, and only one guy that needs a soft check or a hard check or whatever. So the shot callers often have a decision. Who's going to do the next job? I was fortunate. Whenever I hit the yard, I had a conversation with the shot callers, and we agreed. I didn't have to put in work. I was a unique case. The point I made was I put in my work. It's why they locked me up. I'm going to do a video in the next week or two about the circumstances that led to my incarceration to, talk about this. But one day, there was a soft check coming. A guy named Leonard was in a wheelchair. He'd been given a lot of leeway because he was dying. Whenever he hit the yard, he needed a surgery, and CDC had simply said they weren't going to do it. It was too expensive. And so Leonard moved into his cell, and we all knew he was just waiting to die. The rules didn't apply to him. You don't tell a man who's dying he has to come out to yard and do a bunch of burpees. But he won an appeal. The surgery was done, and he began to recover quickly. It rapidly changed from him recovering from a surgery and being unable to come out to the yard to it just being clear that he felt that the rules didn't apply to him. He was taking advantage of the situation. And the shot callers went and told him, hey, you got to come out. We're not asking you to come out. We're telling you, you must come out to yard. Mandatory program. They mean it when they say mandatory. This is non-negotiable. It will happen. You will come out when they tell you to. But again, Leonard really didn't think the rules applied to him. He hadn't been confronted with this reality because he was dying. So he kept not coming out. Finally, one day he did come out. He needed to get something he wanted. I think it was canteen day, and he wanted to go get his goodies he could buy at the canteen. And so the shot callers, a couple of people are all sitting around at the place where the whites hang out and talking. Leonard needs a soft check. He needs to be made an example of. He needs to understand how this works. Who wants this one? Remember, there's 20 or 30 guys that are waiting to put in their work, but this is awkward. Who wants to walk up on a guy in a wheelchair recovering from surgery and go punch him in the face 4 or 5 times? It doesn't feel honorable, if anything else, and inmates do have a sense of honor. And there's one guy in the back, you see his hand kind of pop up, and we look. It's Stan. To explain, Stan is a war veteran. He lost both of his legs in Desert Storm. He's 45, 50 years old. Not only is he a veteran, he's liked and well respected because he does not let his disability get in his way. You have other inmates picking him up and putting him on the dip bars, and he's pumping out dips, and he's out there every day, pouring rain, doing pull-ups with the rest of us. He never used his disability as an excuse, and we all had a lot of respect for him outside of the fact that he served his country, lost limbs for his country, and who doesn't respect that? So we tell him, Stan, you're good, man. You don't owe anything. You don't have to do this one. And he argues. He says, well, I got to do something. And who really wants to go and beat up a guy in a wheelchair? You guys want to do it? At least I'm in a wheelchair. And he had a point. If this goes wrong, and it can, we're talking about hitting somebody in the face 5 or 6 times. Sometimes people get seriously injured. If criminal charges are filed, you don't want to be the able-bodied 20-year-old that went and beat up a guy that was recovering from surgery in a wheelchair. It will look very bad on your criminal record. Stan, on the other hand, he doesn't have legs. He is definitely in a better position to commit violence upon somebody in a wheelchair, as strange as that concept is. And so everybody agrees, yeah, go ahead, Stan, this one's yours. Hey, thanks, good looking out, man. And Stan wheels himself over to the corner of the yard, and you see him lining up his angle. He got as far away from Leonard as he could, 30 yards. And it's all concrete, and he waits until there's not too many people between, and you see him start going. By the time he hit Leonard, he was probably doing 20 miles an hour. I mean, that wheelchair was flying. Leonard didn't see it coming. It was a broadside, just bam. Stan managed to grab Leonard's jacket as they connected. And you saw them kind of spinning and flying through the air. I guess Stan was concerned to keep a handle on something of Leonard's, so that whenever they landed, they'd be right next to each other, because Stan would have had a very difficult time moving over. Leonard perhaps could have ran away. He was ambulatory. He was still in a wheelchair, but he could walk and possibly even run. He was recovering from surgery. They hit the ground, and there was maybe a second and a half where Leonard was trying to get up and Stan was getting his position, and then you saw him come up on one elbow and bam, bam, bam. It's 3 solid connects to Leonard's face. It had to hurt. And Leonard didn't have much fight in him after that. Stan managed to get an elbow on Leonard's chest and got 2 or 3 more socks to black his eyes and really make his point. By then the cops were running and pepper spraying, and they pulled Stan off and handcuffed him. Nobody was trying to hurt Leonard. We even liked Leonard. Nobody wanted to see him seriously injured. These are the rules of prison, and they are harsh rules, but they're the rules, and everybody follows them. Medical was involved a little more than usual because both inmates were in wheelchairs, and if nothing else, it was difficult to restrain them and get them off the yard. And to be clear, this had the prison equivalent of a happy ending. Leonard came out to yard the next day, apologized for fucking up, and was doing burpees with his giant black eyes. Stan, he had a couple of weeks where he wasn't allowed to come out to yard because he was in trouble, but he was out programming with us in just a month or two. It wasn't a big deal. There were no real penalties for this. Prison equivalent of a happy ending. I want to spend a moment and talk about veterans in prison, because I mentioned Stan was a vet. He wasn't the only one. 8% of inmates in the United States are veterans, almost 1 out of 10. If that number doesn't really click or connect, 1 out of 10 inmates, 181,000 veterans are in prison or jail in the United States. I always tried to show a little bit of extra respect to them because they bled, killed, died, lost limbs for me, for us, for our safety. And that was an admirable sacrifice, and I always tried to make clear to them the degree to which I appreciated it. Say thank you for your service. If I can, let me know if I can do something for you. We can all do that. There aren't just 181,000 veterans in prison. There are 1.4 million veterans who are listed as homeless or at the risk of being homeless due to extreme poverty. If you know a veteran, take a moment, do something kind for them. Show that you appreciate the sacrifices that they made. If you don't have the honor of being personally involved with a veteran, but you happen to see somebody who you believe may be a veteran, take the moment. Thank you for your service. It's a small sentence, but in prison out here, it's the least we can do for somebody who sacrificed for us.